Hello everyone. This is the third part of our online course, preparing you for your new life teaching in China. And I thought we better tackle the issue of money, as some of you have already started to ask questions. So let's start with a quick introduction to money in China. First of all, it can be a little bit confusing because of the different terminology used. I lived in China for so long that I forget how confusing it is for newcomers. So first of all, you'll hear the term Renminbi, or RMB for short, and that literally in Mandarin means the people's money. So it's sort of the old communist terminology that they've been using since 1949. Now, in everyday speech, people aren't going to use the currency's name. They're going to call a unit of currency a yuan or a kuai. So let's say I held up a bill, and this is a 1 yuan note, 1 Chinese dollar, if you will. Officially, it's 1 yuan, or in Chinese, yuan. But just like we would say, hey, can you give me a buck? Or it's, $10 instead of $10. They would use the word kuai, which means like a lump of something. So this on the street could be 1 yuan, yuan, or it could be 1 kuai, kuai. And they might add the word qian on the end, which means money. So somebody would say it's kuai qian, means 1 lump of money. Now, there are, for Canadians, because we like to distinguish our bills with colors. Most Canadians have been confused in the U.S. with all the bills being the same color. So luckily, we have colors to help recognize the bills. So one of the most common bills you're going to see is the 100 yuan note, or bai kuai, bai yuan. And this is roughly 20 Canadian dollars. The exchange rate, of course, is going to fluctuate. But generally speaking, over the past years, it's safe to say that 5 Renminbi, or 5 yuan, is the equivalent of 1 Canadian dollar. So 100 yuan is like your $20 note back home. And when you go to a Chinese ATM or bank machine, it's going to spit out these the same way the machine at home spits out 20s. Now, the notes are broken down into smaller units. There is a 50 yuan note, which I don't have on me because I'm in Canada, not China. But I've looked through my bag from my last trip to China, and I found pretty much everything else. So here's the 20. So it's a sort of a gold color, very common. And this one, of course, 20 divided by 5, that's roughly $4. We have a purple-colored 5 yuan note. You'll notice that our friend Chairman Mao is on all of the bills, just like the Queen would be at home, although she's not on all of them, is she? I can't remember if she's on all of them, at least on one side. So this 5 yuan note, or 5 kuai, is roughly a Canadian dollar. And then finally we have the 1 yuan note, which is a light green color, and that is about 20 cents. And this is what's going to get you on a bus. So if you're thinking a little bit about costs, 1 yuan will get you a bus ride in China. 5 yuan in a small city would get you in a taxi. It would get you 3 kilometers in a taxi. But you might need a 10 yuan note. I don't know where I just put my 10 yuan note, but I must have one over here for you. Let me go through my pile. Here's the 10. The 10 is a blue color. Of course, it looks quite similar. So in the larger cities, you'll need 10 yuan to jump in a taxi during the day. Taxis do go up a little bit at night. Now, we have a 1 yuan note, but we also have a 1 yuan coin. So it can be a little bit confusing at first. So just imagine, like, say, 20 years ago when the loonie was first introduced in Canada, we still had dollar notes and we had loonies circulating. It's the same thing. So these days, you might be more likely to get a coin if it's small change or 1 yuan. Now, this 1 yuan or 1 kuai is broken down further into 10 jiao. A jiao could be considered a rough equivalent of a dime. Right? It's a unit of 10 cents. And they come in smaller coins that look like this, roughly the size. If 1 yuan looks like the size of a Canadian quarter, 1 Jiao, or colloquially 1 Mao, is the equivalent or size of a Canadian dime. It's also a Chinese dime in terms of being, a unit of 10 cents. It's further broken down into fen, but these days, a fen is like a penny, and just like in Canada, they're out of circulation. In China, they are still in circulation, but you really can't use them because there's nothing that cheap anymore. So just be careful when you look in your pockets and you find your coins. If you look carefully at them, on one side, it will have the pinyin, which is the Roman letters, so you can read what it is. It will tell you if it's a Jiao or a Yuan. And sometimes it's complicated because there are the old coins circulating, which are a different size. So in my hands right now, this one here is an old 1 Jiao, and this one is a new 1 Jiao, and you can see they're different sizes. So you just have to look at them carefully. Now, Chinese people are very friendly, and in a shop, generally speaking, if you're in a grocery store or any little corner store, nobody's going to cheat you by trying to take your money. You could always spread your money out and they'll help you get the right one. They're very, very honest that way. They may try to trick you in the dealings. Like if you're in a market, they may ask for more than something is worth, but when it actually comes time to pay, almost always they're going to help you out. So that's the currency. Now let's move on to your salary situation. So our contracts are stated in Canadian dollars. But when it comes time to pay you, and generally speaking, you're going to be paid your salary over 10 months in 10 equal payments, your salary will be converted from Canadian dollars into renminbi, and you can check your contract for the details on how that's done. Generally speaking, the school is going to be using a website called www.xe.com. That's the letter X and the letter E.com, and they're going to use the mid-market rate on a particular day of the month. And so you'll know in advance what exchange rate they're using, so there shouldn't be any surprises. Now, before you're paid, tax will be deducted. Some people have been a little bit confused about the tax situation, but it's pretty simple. We convert your Canadian salary into renminbi, and that's your gross salary. And then everybody in China is entitled to a pre-tax deduction of 4,800 renminbi, which if you went back and did our math, divide by 5, is close to $1,000. It's 900 and some dollars. So you deduct 4,800 renminbi from your gross salary, and then the 25% tax bracket is what most teachers will find themselves in, is applied. So we would multiply that amount by 0.25. And then there's a further deduction that you're entitled to of 1,005 renminbi. So to get that straight, we take your salary, Canadian dollars, we convert it to renminbi, then we subtract 4,800 renminbi, then we multiply that amount by 0.25, that's the 25%, and then we deduct a further 1,005 renminbi, and then you're left with the amount of tax that will actually be deducted. For most teachers, unless you're a very experienced teacher at the upper end of the salary scale, the actual amount deducted is going to be somewhere between $900 and $1,000 Canadian a month. Okay, so then when you go back and do the calculation from your gross salary, it fluctuates depending on the exchange rate, but it's approximately 17, 18, 19% tax. That's what people are paying these days. So people often ask, how much will I pay tax? Well, it's not an easy answer. On paper, every teacher will fall in the 25% tax bracket, but the actual amount of tax deducted will be more like somewhere under 20%, say 17, 18, or 19%. So then that amount, after the tax is deducted, that amount will be deposited into your Chinese bank account. And the school staff the admin assistant or whoever it might be when you arrive at the school will assist you in opening a local bank account. So everybody's going to get a bank account at the Bank of China or one of the other large Chinese banks. And you will be issued a Chinese debit card, which will look just like your debit card from home and can be used just like your debit card from home. There are ATMs everywhere, and you'll be able to pull out Chinese currency from those cards very, very easily. Now, sending money home. Some of you are concerned, naturally, about how will I get money home. You may have student loan payments to make, or mortgage payments, or who knows. Who knows why you need to get that money home, but you probably do. This, unfortunately, has become a bit of a hassle in China. In the old days, let's say more than 10 years ago, schools were actually able to pay Canadian teachers directly into their Canadian bank account. But now there are laws in place that prohibit that. So the Chinese currency is very much controlled currency, and the Chinese government is concerned about all sorts of things, whether it's tax evasion or corruption and other stuff. So they have strict limits on how money comes in and out of China. So here I'm going to give you a brief overview of your options. Now, most of the time, you could simply go down to your Chinese bank and wire transfer the money to your Canadian bank. So you're just going to need to get the your bank account info from your Canadian bank, which is your bank number, the branch number, the institution number, and also something called a SWIFT code. If you've never had to do a wire transfer before, there's a code that matches your particular bank, which is necessary when doing any international wire transfers. You could just Google it if you're online, and you'll be able to find that SWIFT code for your bank. So you could go down to your Chinese bank and wire the money yourself. As a foreigner, you're allowed to do that, but it does require that you have official paperwork from the local tax bureau. So when you get paid, you're not going to have that paperwork right away, and sometimes it could take a few weeks to get it. And then, sometimes we say things in China can be a little bit tricky and difficult. Sometimes getting the official tax paperwork can be one of those tricky things. So, and it has caused teachers some frustration in the past. So what I want to prepare you for is the reality that you may not be able to wire your money home just on a whim. Like if it's Tuesday afternoon and you say, I want to get my money home today, it's probably not going to happen on Tuesday afternoon. It's going to take some planning and some discussion with your school to make sure you can get the proper receipts from the local tax bureau. In most cities, those tax receipts are available a few weeks after the salary has been paid. A second option, which occurs in many schools, is that the school will assist you in transferring money home by using one of the Chinese citizens bank accounts who works at the school. So it might be a Chinese teacher or maybe some other staff member. And naturally, this could cause some Canadians to feel a little bit uncomfortable, but believe me, most Chinese people they live with this bureaucracy, and they find ways to get around it, and they know that you need to get your money home, and they probably all have had friends or family who have needed to send money abroad too, so they understand, and they're generally willing and keen to help. Each Chinese citizen is able to wire up to $50,000 a year overseas. So, generally speaking, that means that one Chinese staff member could assist one Canadian teacher, and they would have capacity to do that each year. So your school might set up a system like this. A third method that I've known some teachers in China to have done is to simply request two debit cards, and they mail one home to family. And you can find certain banks in Canada where that Chinese debit card will work, and you can just withdraw money there. For example, if it's a Bank of China, you could find a Bank of China branch in Vancouver or Toronto or some of the big cities. And then one other option that I was just speaking to a former colleague about, he works near Shanghai, and what he does is he's gone to Hong Kong and opened a multi-currency bank account at HSBC, which is a big multinational branch. And what he does is a couple times a year, he travels down to Hong Kong because he wants to go down there anyway, and it's quite affordable to travel to Hong Kong. You can often get very cheap flights to Shenzhen, which is the border town, and then just cross the border on foot and jump on the subway and you're there. Or you could take a train down, and from any major city you could get a high-speed train down to Hong Kong as well. So what he does is he saves up some cash and he carries it down to Hong Kong and exchanges it there. Hong Kong is full of money changers, and these aren't people in the street. These are, official money exchange shops. And he finds the best rate, exchanges it into Hong Kong dollars, deposits it into his HSBC account, and then he can simply go online like you would at home, and he does the wire transfer himself. So that's a fourth option. The fifth option, which I have no experience with, would be using one of these cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin or something like that. But I wouldn't recommend that because I have no idea if it works or what. But apparently some people are exploring that as well. So those are our money options for getting money home. Again, I'll be perfectly honest, it is one of the things that does frustrate some teachers, just because you might be delayed a few weeks in making an arrangement for it to happen. So my strong recommendation is, if you have regular payments that need to be made on a monthly basis, whether they're student loans or mortgage payments, just do some careful planning beforehand. Make sure you've got, enough money to make the first few months' payments. Don't go over to China thinking, I've got to send money home on September 15th, for example, because then you'll be over there a little bit stressed out. So just give yourself a couple of months of breathing room, and then everything should be fine. Now, if you want to bring money the opposite direction, you can simply use your debit or credit card from home. They can be used in many ATMs in China, but not all. Now, China has a lot of different banks and credit unions, but there are a handful of large ones that will accept foreign ATM or debit cards and credit cards. So banks like the Bank of China, China Merchants Bank, the Agricultural Bank, the China Construction Bank, you'll see them when you get there. They, for the most part, will allow you to use your card. All you have to do is, when you find an ATM machine in China, you just look at the back of your card and you're going to look for the sign to say, does it say plus? Does it say interact? What is our international system? And then you look for that on the ATM machine. And if it's got it, generally speaking, it will work. Of course, your bank back home will charge a fee. They might charge $5 or even up to $7. So typically when I'm using my bank card in China, my Canadian bank card that is, I don't take out just a few renminbi. I would take out, at least 2,000 or 3,000 renminbi, which, 3,000 renminbi would be something like $500 at least. And then I don't worry so much about the transaction fee. Now, when you're first coming to China, we do recommend that you come prepared to bring about 1,000 Canadian dollars with you. So that means either bringing your ATM card and just taking out the money, or preparing some renminbi in advance. The reason we recommend about $1,000 is just because you're not going to be paid on arrival. You're going to be paid after a month's work, and naturally you are going to have some costs getting set up. China is very cheap, and your apartment is provided free, and you have all your furnishings in the apartment, but you may still want to buy a few things like cutlery and few plates, and there may be something left behind in the apartment from a previous teacher, but it may be that you have been provided a brand new apartment that nobody's lived in before, and you want to start from scratch. So we recommend about $1,000 should do it. Now, it is possible to wire money from a Canadian account to a Chinese bank account, but I don't recommend that as a regular thing to do. When I bought a car in China years ago, and I also bought an apartment, and I had to wire money, but there are restrictions there as well. So, for example, I wasn't able to go and pull it all out at the same time. My Canadian dollars arrived in my Chinese account, and it sat in the account as Canadian dollars. And I was only allowed to exchange X amount of dollars per day. So I had to go to the bank every day and exchange it before I could withdraw it all at once. So that's not a very effective way. And the other thing to consider is that every time you wire money, there is a wire transfer fee. I forgot to mention that in the previous slide, but it does cost you, something like $15 or $20 to wire money home. So that's the other reason why you might want to prepare in advance and not rely on wiring money home every single month. It would be better to, save up money and then wire it once every 3 months or 4 or 5 months or whatever it is, just to save yourself some fees. And then finally, just a few more comments about money. China is very much a cash-based society, so you can't rely on your debit card like you might do in Canada. If you're like me, I hardly ever carry cash now. I just use a debit card or credit card everywhere I go. But in China, if you're in a small shop, and there are also lots of street vendors, it may be that you are preferring to buy your fruits and vegetables just on the sidewalk outside your apartment, where local farmers and merchants will be set up. Of course, you're going to have to be using cash. Now, increasingly, people are using debit and credit cards, and even some people are transferring money using apps on their cell phone. So we see people holding up their cell phone and scanning it in certain stores and restaurants and things like that now too. But generally speaking, it's a cash society. China, again, is very safe. You've probably already done your research on that. And you will see lots of people with handing out cash, and nobody seems too concerned about it. But as a foreigner, again, it's just best not to flash your money around. So you're going to be carrying probably lots of cash often. Just keep it hidden in a pocket. I never worried about wearing a money belt or anything like that. It's not like a place where there are pickpockets everywhere and you have to be that worried. You would be especially worried if you're on a crowded space like a bus or a subway where people have crammed themselves in. But generally speaking, walking around, I didn't even use a wallet. I just stuffed my cash in my pocket and away we went, and I never had any problems. One thing I do want to mention is we recommend that Canadian teachers do be sensitive to your Chinese colleague situation. So you're going to be working in a school with Chinese teachers, and hopefully you're going to make friends with them, and you're going to work collaboratively with them, and you're going to have lots of conversations in the staff room or in the school cafeteria. And they're generally going to be very helpful for you, and they want to help you get set up and et cetera, et cetera. But when it comes time to, talk about money, you should be aware that you're making at least 5 times more, and in some cases a lot more than that, than they are. And you're essentially doing the same job. So imagine if you were working in a Canadian school and some foreign teacher showed up and was teaching in the classroom right beside you and sat in the same staff room and openly declared to you that they made $250,000 a year teaching the exact same thing you were doing. You would just consider how that might make you feel. It's one of the things that does make some teachers a little bit uncomfortable on both sides, both as Canadian teachers knowing that we're quite privileged when we're living over in China. And also some of the Chinese teachers may feel a bit sensitive about that. So just wanted to bring that up. And then finally, I just say a few words about costs. If you've watched some of the videos that I've made about the schools and the areas around the schools, you've seen some of the costs of things. So for example, in the video that's filmed outside this school in Langfang, I asked one of the vendors how much a gene, which is 500 grams, roughly a pound, of bananas costs, and he responded, 2.5 which means 2.5 yuan. Well, that's 50 cents a pound, right? So very affordable. We passed an apple cart, which had a sign on the ground, which said 3 yuan for a gene. So again, 50 cents or 55 cents a pound for apples. So fresh fruit and vegetables are very, very affordable. If you went into your school cafeteria, you could probably eat for 10 yuan or less, which is $2 or less. And if you went to a very local restaurant just for a bowl of noodles or something simple, you should be eating for definitely under 20 renminbi, which is, $4. It's very easy to live on just a couple of bucks for a meal. Having said that, of course, you can go to fancier restaurants and spend quite a bit of money. And if you went to, an all-you-can-eat buffet in the local 4 or 5-star hotel, which you might want to do for breakfast once a month for a treat, for a real Western breakfast, well, that could set you back 150 or even 200 renminbi, which would be like quite an expensive meal back home. So there's the whole range. But generally speaking, things are very affordable. Imported things are expensive. Local things are very affordable. So that's it. That's our session on money matters. I hope I've answered most of the questions and concerns that you've had. And if you have any questions, make sure you ask the question in the online course forum. That way, when I answer it, all the other teachers can benefit from hearing it too. Okay, we'll see you next time.